Well, good afternoon. This is a really an important moment for me to be able to sit with my now friends and partners, and to have the honor of being able to introduce this panel. I'm only going to take a minute because I don't want to take more minutes away from the three of you. Honoring Nations Canada means a great deal to me and to those of us at the Samuel Center for Social Connectedness. And I don't want to say especially me, but kind of especially me because of the thing I was talking about this morning, about being accepted for who you are. And not only could that be someone's work, it could also be partly their work, because that's what they really need too. And Candace, we've known each other the longest, which isn't even that long. We met in 2019 at the symposium, but I think I know we felt kind of a kinship ever since. So when I learned about Honoring Nations Canada forming, and especially that you were a big part of it, Leah a big part of it, and Matt a big part of it, and others that I've been meeting, I really thought, well, this is really important work, and it's not every day that you get to be part of an initiative and a program that is really truly holding a space, and I don't even put me in that place of holding the space. I feel somewhere that I'm allowed inside the space, not asked or expected to hold it, and that there's joy in being trusted and respected to be there, and to know that if you're called upon, you'll respond, and a great opportunity to learn. And there's I'll just close with this, such a link between belonging and the Indigenous teachings, which I don't claim to know. I'm claiming to be possibly a good student, definitely a student, and I think that is a lot what life is about, is to learn and come to a place without an expectation, and to be welcomed in, and to learn to be a much better listener. The connection with the lands, the connection with, say, hope and optimism, and the sense of going the seven generations principle. Well, when I started to learn about it some years ago, I couldn't even visualize what that looked like. I can count to 7 backwards, and I can count to 7 forwards, capable of that. But to talk about our responsibilities, and not only to doesn't have to be one's own children or grandchildren, all of our children, all of our grandchildren, and so on, but also to really honor the ancestors, and to do this in ceremony. Some I would be allowed to be at, some that it's not appropriate, but to understand that this reverence for Mother Earth on one hand, and the reverence for all of creation, and then on the other hand, what I would say, the mystery of it all, the things we can't see, and the beauty of the whole cosmos, and living in a good way. Well, I know that you're part of my journey, and that the work that Honoring Nations Canada is doing, it is by Indigenous people, and not only in terms of, when people tell you we'd like you to create a mandate, but here are the things that we'd like in your mandate, then we'd like you to come back to us with 10 projects, and here are the 10 that we'd like you to come back to. There's no space for this, and the reason I know it, not because I've tried to do that, the reason I know it is because none of you and others that are part of HNC would really stay in if that's what it was like. This is authentic. Thank you for letting me introduce you. I'm going to step away now, and we'll all enjoy this session.
Thank you. Am I on? Is this thing on? Kim, before you go, and we will see you in a few more minutes, I just wanted to say thank you. You have created an atmosphere of belonging that is absolutely extraordinary. Oftentimes you go to Indigenous conferences or they're not Indigenous conferences, and this is a people conference. You are the Chief Belonging Officer, and can you imagine what all of our organizations would be like if we all had a Chief Belonging Officer? So thank you, CBO Kim. Yeah. Good day, my name is Candace Wasacase-Lafferty. I come from the Kakwa First Nation, which is in southern Saskatchewan, and I want to begin by thanking Ron and Becky this morning for that amazing pipe ceremony as we watched the sun rise over Toronto. I was deeply honored and impressed by the number of people who came out at 7 o'clock in the morning to share that with us. It's a deep spiritual teaching, and we are very grateful to see that happen in such a big urban environment. I'm used to my ceremonies happening out in the land in the middle of the prairies of Saskatchewan, and this was a beautiful experience, and thank you for sharing that with us. Creating space for Indigenous knowledges and belonging, and we have an opportunity to talk to you today about honoring nations. I'm blessed to be sitting here with our co-chairs, Matt Vickers and Leah Nicholas McKenzie, who are among some of Canada's deepest, brightest speakers on Indigenous work. And we have the pleasure by the end of this session to introduce you to our entire circle of advisors. And it's critical that we recognize that we bring together some of the best minds in this country, people who've been in the trenches doing this work for many years, fighting for the rights of Indigenous voice. And coming and joining Honoring Nations Canada was an opportunity to belong to an amazing circle of Indigenous voice, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you. Very briefly, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Honoring Nations, and then I have we're going to hear from the chairs of the advisory circle. So, in the last number of years, there's been concerted effort to bring together a program that originally started in the United States at Harvard University. They've been doing this kind of work since the 1990s with the idea that there is a vast amount of knowledge from Indigenous communities on Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing that is unique and has something to teach the world. We come from a place of uplifting practices driven by the idea of sovereignty and building nations. And do we do this for Canada? Maybe. Do we do this for the world? Most likely, but we begin by doing this for each other. This whole idea of nation-to-nation dialogue, nation-to-nation building within the country of Canada will be our first rung of priorities. There are practices around taking over child welfare systems. There are practices around economic development, building economies, building sustainable ways of life. And I know Matt Vickers is going to speak very proudly about that. I'm going to get right into their bios. I'm going to get right into who they are, and I'm going to get right into the substance of this talk. And we will be around for a few minutes afterwards. If you have any questions about getting involved with Honoring Nations, we are a part of Fulbright Canada. And if you want to visit Fulbright Canada's website, you'll see everything about us, what we're doing, where we're going. So we're a newly formed organization. We've only met in person twice, and that was made possible by this conference. And so another great reason to thank Kim for bringing us together, gathering voice when she doesn't exactly know exactly where we're going, but she trusts to bring the voices together to make it happen. So that's a little bit about Honoring Nations. That's a little bit about Fulbright, and our goals is nation building. Over the last 2 days, we have heard about the power and yet imagining a better reality. This program is an opportunity for taking that imagination and putting it into action. We imagine a better reality, one that restores sovereignty to Indigenous peoples, celebrates and shares examples of excellence when this is done. We imagine a future when we promote nation-to-nation connectedness and share best practices so communities and nations can learn from each other and lift each other up. We asked in the opening session, when was the last time you dreamed? And so I invite my colleagues to share their hopes and dreams for this program. And first up, I'd like to present to you Liam Nicholas McKenzie. And I'm going to tell you, this woman has had the career that I've always dreamed of. She has been a mover and shaker in this country for many, many years, and I've admired her from afar. She is the former Chief of Staff of Canada's Minister of Justice and a Special Advisor for Indigenous Issues at Global Affairs. Please welcome Honoring Nations Co-Chair, Liam McKenzie.
Huliwan, Nildaliwas Lianiklas, Willistagwe, Nila Naga Nujiaunil Nagutkuk. I just told you where I belong. I am a member of the Nicholas and Bear families of the Willistagwe Nation. We're also known as Maliseets in English. And I am a deeply grateful guest in these territories. There's a saying that I love, and it is, enter the room like your ancestors opened the door, because they did. My ancestors fought. My ancestors struggled. They survived attempts not only to assimilate them, but to eradicate them. And I always think about that when I think about how I need to show up and how I need to be brave and how I need to be hopeful. And so what I'm inspired by with Honoring Nations Canada is the idea of lifting up each other and those who are stepping through that door, but not only stepping through the door, who are opening the door for future generations. And I hope that I am one of those people as well that are opening doors for future generations. Now, I spend a lot of time talking to Canadians about the real history of this country, and it's hard work, and it's actually very emotionally draining. People find it shocking when I talk to them about my experiences or the experiences of others, and it is deeply, deeply personal for me. But it's work that I feel that I must do. What I like about this initiative, though, is that we are flipping the script. And we are celebrating not only our resilience and our survival, but our excellence. And uplifting those who are doing the hard work of reassuming our jurisdiction and reassuming our governance models. And I want Indigenous youth to be inspired to soar. And April, your poem last night was absolutely incredible. And if I could do that, I just have to say we all need to soar. And we must. Our ancestors opened that door to us. And I'm not saying that youth shouldn't have a healthy dose of cynicism, but I want youth to have a healthy dose of hope. And I've been very fortunate to do a lot of work at an international level, as Dr. Kenneth Deere has, and many others, many of the incredible colleagues that are on the Honoring Nations Canada Advisory Board. And we're trying to figure out how to do this work not only at a national level, but also an international level, to celebrate Indigenous innovation there as well. And if I've got a couple of minutes, I'd like to tell a little story. We're storytellers. Many years ago, I worked for an organization called the Assembly of First Nations. It was an advocacy organization at a national level here in Canada. And there was, of course, the terrible earthquake and tsunami in Indonesia and other parts of the Indian Ocean. And so I contacted a friend of mine, an Indigenous woman in Indonesia, to see if she was okay, and also to see what could we do to help. And she said, well, we need medicines, we need money, we need clothing. And I thought, oh, we don't know how to do that. But we're an advocacy organization, and we know how to use the United Nations. So what can we do there? And we discovered that the UN was actually doing a report on the tsunami, and we thought, all right, this is where we want Indigenous peoples to be able to have their own voice at the international level. And so we said to them, this is what we'd like to do. We'd like to help you get into this report. And they said, well, you can't help us write a report until you come here for yourselves and sit down with the survivors and sit down with the Indigenous peoples and understand their hopes and dreams. And so we did. We took a delegation to Indonesia. We landed 2 months to the date after the tsunami in Banda Aceh. And we spent weeks there with them. And we co-wrote a report that we then submitted to the United Nations. And I've been told many times that that was the first instance that people had heard of an Indigenous to Indigenous disaster response mission. And we raised money to bring them to Canada and to the United States. We took them to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues at the UN so they could speak to for themselves. But we also took them to Dr. Kenneth Deere's community so that they could be inspired by Indigenous peoples in Canada and see the kinds of advancements that they had made. So this is about inspiration, it's about hope, it's about working together and innovating, and I hope to see much more of this in the future, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Leah. And Leah really challenges us to think of ourselves as citizens of the world, as Indigenous people of the world, and what is our global contribution to that. We also have Matt Vickers, and Matt is our elder statesman. I often think of that because he's often the voice of reason at the council table, and he brings greetings to you. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself, but I'm going to tell you that Matt Vickers is the CEO and director of Northern Nations Cooperative, and we're just blessed that he accepted the position as our co-chair. Matt, I'm wondering from you, how do you feel the economy of Indigenous governance fits into the Canadian economy?
Thank you. Am I mic'd? You can hear me? Great. So first and foremost, hereditary name Ganats. So a greeting from the Tsimshian people. Shimoygit, Simgiget, Sigrimanach, Doyexum, Doyexum Nisum. So thank you to you all. Most importantly, Standing Bear for acknowledging the territory. I thank him. Elder Ron, thank you so much for the special blessing this morning and all those that attended. I was sharing with Kim, and I will get to the question. I was sharing with Kim last night that it was a very special night. I've got to admit, originally I was thinking, I need some rest. I don't know if I'm going to go to this thing. Well, the Creator had a different plan for us, and I'm very thankful. To me, the people in this room are like walking in our forest and hugging trees, because trees have spirits too. If you're ever down, out of energy, walk into the forest and hug a tree. Hug one of our grandmothers, the biggest cedar you can find. That's what happened for me last night. The singing, the poetry. I don't know about you, but it was hard not to tear up and feel invigorated. So I say to each and every one of you what we're taught. And we're all Indigenous from somewhere, right? Yes? We're taught that we have 4 archetypes within. The warrior, to fight for what is right. The teacher, to teach what's good and true. The visionary, to look to the future for the betterment of all. And most importantly, the healer, to heal oneself. Because then the family sees that. The family wants that healing. Community sees the family, community wants that healing. And then the nation sees the community, and the nation wants that healing. I implore you to work on those 4 archetypes, all 4. Not perfect 1 or 2, all 4. The question, how do I see where we fit with respect to the economy? There's roughly 2 million Indigenous people in Canada. So 5% of the population. Right now, with respect to the GDP, I guess we're about 1.5%, roughly. Northern Nations Cooperative, the goal is to bring all Indigenous entities in Canada together under a business entity. And a business entity based on the Harvard study, so another connection here, that separates politics from business. crucially, crucially important to have business people running businesses. So how are we going to accomplish that? Someone has to go first. Like, we started this before COVID. COVID hit. Everything kind of stopped. Because I think not just like Indigenous communities, most people like to sit across from you and see you face to face. The expression, see the whites of your eyes. Who are you? What are you here for? Are you here for us? Or are you here to increase your bottom line? So I believe that Honoring Nations Canada is being put together to look at those governance systems that are going to assist us get to that spot with respect to 5% of the GDP. And I'll step out here and I'll say, hopefully in 15 years, we'll see that happen. But we've got major strides to accomplish in doing that. We've got to get investment bankers, corporations, industry to say, yes, this is the model. Yes, I want to invest. And then all the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, come together and work together as one. So that's the goal, and I believe that's my time. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt and Leah. And
Of course, there's never enough time to go into the depth and knowledge that's based on this, but I do want to call forward the circle of advisors that belong to the Honoring Nations Advisory Circle, Dr. Becky, and I'll just ask you to come stand on stage with us, and we'd like to present a gift to Kim. So I'd like to bring forward Becky Cook, Dr. Becky Cook, Dr. Joe Dragon, we got Kirk Izgiak, Cliff Freegan, who you heard from earlier, Frankie Young, who is Faculty of Law over at the University of Ottawa, Leslie Varley, she's NISCA, Executive Director of BC Association of Friendship Centers. Brian Phillips, please, smile and Brian, please come on up. Senior Advisor, Global Affairs Canada, Bob Watts. Bob, he's a reconcilier, he is the former Executive Director of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Mohawk Ojibwe. We also have Sarah Medanik. She is the president of the Gord Downie Wenjack Foundation, Métis Nation of Alberta. And our Fulbright crew that we cannot do this work without, I'd like to bring forward Robin McClay, who is the regional director of Fulbright West. And of course, our president and our CEO, Michael Hawes. Please come forward. I'd also like to recognize we do have others that aren't able to join us. Also belonging to our board is Chief Kulan Adamak, Dr. Mike Gagnon. Yep, oh yeah, I'm getting to her. I was making her special. Thanks for blowing it. No. Carol Ann Hilton, Bob Casius, Chris Lewis, and Bill Montour. And last but not least, I want to announce a really special person who makes all of us look wonderful. She is the newest. She is the Associate Director of the Honoring Nations Canada program, Cassandra Cizon. Please come forward. So Cassandra's going to help me present a wonderful gift in a traditional way. And if Kim Samuel could please come forward. Can I get you to hang on to this for just one second? So where I come from, when you are presented a blanket, where I come from, when you're presented a blanket, it's an offer of protection from my family to yours. And Kim, thank you for providing this beautiful blanket that has wrapped us all this day. Thank you so much.